Hello and welcome to Sustain, the podcast where we talk about sustaining open source for the long haul. Who are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going? I was going to translate that into German and I just couldn't be bothered. I think I would mess it up. It's great to be here today. Before I introduce our guests, I want to make sure you know who the voices are on this podcast. I am, of course, Richard Littauer. I'll ask someone else to pronounce my name properly in German later, but for now, that's me. And I'm joined today by a co-host, which makes me so happy. I'm joined by Abby. Abby, how you doing?
I'm good. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you. It's Abby Kumanak-Mays from GitHub. And I'm joined today by two amazing guests who are calling in from London and Germany, respectively, but both of them are kind of calling in, philosophically from Germany, from the Sovereign Tech Fund. We have Lorenzo Sciandra. Lorenzo, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. And your streak of perfect pronunciations keeps on going. Well done.
Thanks. I did mispronounce my own last name by accident. Let's just edit that out later. And Mirko Swillus. Mirko, how are you doing?
Thanks for having us.
It's great to have you. So Lorenzo is joining us as the technologist at the Sovereign Tech Fund. And then Mirko is a program manager at the Sovereign Tech Fund. For those of you who haven't been around in the ecosystem for a bit and haven't checked all the news, the Sovereign Tech Fund is a very large fund that's been set up basically by the German government to help fund open source software. It is novel. I think it's the only real fund that's doing this at scale and has been for some years, which is really exciting. We keep hearing rumblings about American open source, but like all things America, the rumble is just very large and then the actual work is not very great. Lorenzo was previously on this podcast, so you may recognize his name. That was a while ago. He's a senior software engineer at Microsoft previously, and he was a core maintainer of React Native for a while. He's led significant initiatives and collaborations in the React Native ecosystem, also a passionate advocate for mental health in the tech industry, which is probably why we want to pay the maintainers. Am I right? I think I'm right. Mirko also has a lot of experience, 15 years of professional experience in software engineering, a lot of different setups and roles. He's specifically interested in the question of how engineering communities organize to achieve sustainable productivity, which I want to get more into later. But we've had various people from the Sovereign Tech Fund on this podcast before. We just had some people who work with the Sovereign Tech Fund. If you remember the podcast we had with Jan Neidhart and Alba Herrerias Ramirez. See, I can't pronounce everything perfectly all the time. Spaniards, I'm trying so hard. Italians, you're a bit easier. Now, Lorenzo, I don't want to steal your fire. Tell me, why this podcast? Why are we having another STF podcast? What's going on today?
Well, I've been very passionate about movies, is where I'm going to do a super quick OT. Basically, whenever you make a movie, there's always why now? And it's either because it's always relevant or because right now there's something happening that is very, very important. And I think actually the reason why we're here today is both of those things. On one end, because open source sustainability is always a topic that needs more attention, and we need to, give more explanation and reasoning and examples of people giving money to open source. And also the timing perspective is that we have just launched a new program, which is called the Fellowship for Maintainers, that Mirko is driving. And it's opening right now. If you're listening when this episode is coming out, the application window should be open. We'll discuss more details, but this is one of the two reasons, because the application now is open for this fellowship, and we're really excited to make sure that all the important eyeballs are looking at it, and all the people that are listening to this podcast are very important people to us. So we hope that they'll be interested.
That is awesome. I'm so excited to hear that you are paying all open source maintainers everywhere as much as they need or want. Mirko, tell me the details. How do I get that?
Yeah, I think we have to do a little bit of expectation management here because, as always, we are starting small. So that really we have to admit that this is going to be a pilot. So it's for just a couple of maintainers that we're going to support with this program. And we are starting also iteratively. So that's also what I like about the Sovereign Tech Fund, that they're really conscious about the approach that we're taking as a team towards the community, that we really want to learn together with the community and not jumping too fast into assumptions about things that might turn out not to be true by the end, right? So I did a survey in spring, and there was lots of people responding to this. So actually more than 530 people responded to that little survey I set up, and our great team shoot out to the world, and everyone was really responding. And there was lots of data insights within that survey. And that helped us to inform this initiative as well and this pilot that we're now doing. And so we came up with 2 different options or alternatives there. So the first one is we want to contract people in a freelance mode. That's typical freelance contracts that we're doing. So we have also experience with that one. So also within our general fund, we are contracting people via that mode. So that's very common also throughout the industry. And then the second option would to be internal employment with the sovereign tech fund itself. So one person would have the chance to become a full member of the sovereign tech fund as a maintainer in residence, as we call it, and be fully a team member, like a full team member for the team, and for a limited amount of time. So the whole pilot is running for 12 months throughout 2025. And that's what we're going to start now, yeah.
So we've seen the Sovereign Tech Fund fund individual projects before. For example, I know they've helped fund the GNOME project last year, which is really exciting. And that was a very large grant, so thank you. Why maintainers as opposed to projects? Why is it important to fund people as opposed to things?
Yeah, I think the main difference to the general fund is, so that's kind of complementary programs, you could say. So they're not competing with each other in form. It's just something complementary that we want to try out, that we want to learn with together with the community. But for our general fund, we always have those like more larger projects, right? Where coming from project management, you always have a specific start and a specific end. And in between, you're doing deliverables, right? You have a very specific scope of work that you're going to work on. And for us, it's almost milestones, right? Things that people work on. And then in the end, they deliver something. For us, it's always very beneficial because we are the public. So you're not delivering to someone in the private and then people, then the stuff gets into the drawer. For us, it's really, we are the customer here, we are the public, and we do this contract and then people delivering. And for maintainers specifically, we always felt that there is a little bit of a gap here because we have those solo maintainers, people working on multiple projects for most of the time, and they have trouble to really name sometimes the deliverables they're gonna work on while maintaining the projects, because there might be like recurring, but also like non-recurring activities within those projects that you can name. I have to replace the light bulb over here, like almost like a janitor or something like that's like maintaining a house or something. You can't name all the things that you're going to do by Christmas this year because you just don't know. It's maintaining, right? It's triaging, security, vulnerabilities. That's, doing code reviews, that's working on the documentation. That's all the things that you do on your day-to-day job, so to say. For most people, we know it's unfortunately not a job. It's something that they do in the evening and on the weekends, besides doing their childcare and whatnot. So, and we want to put those activities and the people to front and center, so to say, and make it possible to get funding for this often unseen work that is so important for our digital infrastructure.
Yeah, and I just want to say I'm really excited to see this. I'm biased, but I do love the focus on maintainers. I know that's my day job, focusing on maintainers. But I was curious, looking at the results of that survey you did, was there anything really surprising? I know you've been thinking about this ecosystem for a while, but did anything unexpected come out of that?
First of all, there were some assumptions we had, and those were confirmed. So that's a good thing, so that you have this confirmation. So that's also a good outcome for me and for us as a team, yes. But on the other hand, there were also things where I was really surprised. So for instance, the majority of the respondents said they have a professional experience that's more than 20 years in professional software engineering, in open source. And that was a surprise to me. But it's also kind of reconfirming the things that we also see in the community, that it's really hard to get young engineers, young talent, so to say, into the project. And we have lots of people doing this job again in air quotes, for a very long time. And that is always surprising for me when I see it in data.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that.
There's other outcomes from the survey that we also want to share as we go through communicating also with this fellowship communications. So there will be some pieces that we take out of the survey and communicate it also and shared with the community, because I think we owed it also a little bit because so many people took the time to respond to the survey. So that's something we plan to do.
Oh, that's great. Will it be like a blog post or something together with the program announcement? Or
yeah, let's see. So we have a very busy communications manager this time. So a shout out goes to our colleague Pohen, who's really busy managing all the communications that we're doing. But yeah, we will figure out what kind of format is ideal for that kind of communication.
Yeah, one question I had, I am glad that you're looking at these people who are solo maintainers who possibly maintain lots of smaller projects. But one thing I've been thinking about in terms of open source sustainability is that a lot of times when someone's maintaining many projects that are smaller, they're not always following what's considered best practices for sustainability in open source. And they don't necessarily want to. Like, this really works well for them. With this fellowship, if you're funding someone to work on this full time, how are you going to balance funding them as a person, but also maybe enforcing some best practices to help with the ecosystem? Are you thinking at all in that direction?
We are thinking about this. This was also something that came up in our survey. The fact that a lot of the responders were also interested in, for example, learning from other people. They were interested in getting guidance, not only, just on improving, their CI implementation or their testing, but also how can I get more people involved in my project? So really on the whole 360 aspect of being an owner, a contributor, a maintainer of an open source project. So the way we're going to do it for this pilot is actually a bit in-house because, again, we want to keep it fluid. We want to be able to also be reactive to the fellows and what their needs are going to be throughout the fellowship. So what we're going to start a forum is basically having me as their partner in a way. I'll be doing some monthly mentorship with them. So it's going to be a regular one-to-one check-ins to sort of like help them achieve the goals that they want around their open source project. So it's not just giving them money to do their work and feel sustained when they do that, but also like help them get to a better place in this 12 months phase. And also, again, this is something that we will keep evolving and discussing and iterating in collaboration with them. We're also going to do like sessions where they're all together in the same room, either virtually or physically, depending on who ends up being one of them, so that they can also share insight with each other. Like, one of the reasons, if you want to say why I volunteered to cover this role, is because before COVID, I used to do maintainers meetup here in London, which literally wanted to serve the purpose, like make these maintainers meet each other, talk to each other, vent to each other. Because when you're an open source maintainer, it's great and you feel very fulfilled, but at the same time, you always tend to funnel a bit into your own thing and don't really look outside. Like, maybe there are, like, in the JavaScript space, there are, let's say, 20 projects that do similar libraries, but because you're a maintainer of one, you don't talk to these other people. And so you miss out on that connection. Sometimes it feels very lonely. And when you get these people together, it's always like almost a relief for these people. We're like, I'm not the only one suffering these things. I also have bad issues getting opened on my repository. And I don't know how to handle all these crazy people that are like shouting at me because I'm not solving this problem fast enough. So yeah, we're trying to think of this fellowship as a way of like helping these maintainers 360.
That's amazing. And you're definitely speaking my language. Getting maintainers together and having them share best practices is my jam. So thank you for continuing that. Keep on doing that. And I think your experience with React Native will be so helpful. And I think mentorship is often that missing piece in open source for helping these projects. I guess my question is, there are many different types of open source projects. Not all of them are big corporate open source things, starting corporate open source things like React Native. How are you thinking about supporting people that have very different types of open source projects than you?
So first off, because it's a mentoring and not a coaching in a way, there's more, room there. So it's more about like helping them achieve what they want based on my experience. The nice thing about having been involved in React Native at that level for such a long time is that I actually was able to work on different projects all at the same time. So I wasn't just focused on the core React Native project. I was working on also a series of smaller projects. So in a way, it's not like, oh, okay, you have 100 users and 100 downloads. Let's set up the CI that takes, 3 hours to set up and always run on every company. Like, we're not going to do that. We're going to set some achievable goals based on their needs. I think there are some basics that every maintainer can use. For example, how to better handle your time, how to maybe set up some templates in your repository so that, when someone opens a PR, they already see the right information. If you have an issue template, that can help you funnel, the right type of problems to the right people, or can help you set up certain, some labeling systems so that you can have more clarity on what to prioritize, how to set the right expectation with your community, how to create a community. Like there are elements that apply at every level. And of course, then the difference, or okay, are we trying to do a big project? Then you actually need extra requirements, you need extra compliances and etc. A smaller set of problems, but really here, my goal is going to be, to just support them in what they need and cover some of the basics. You work at GitHub, so you know very well that, right now every repository has that page, I think is the /community one, where it tells you if a repository has all the basics, like the code of conduct, has a security compliance, all those documents and elements set up. So for example, that's a great starting point. Again, it's fluid. We're going to see how it goes and based on what they want and what they need.
And maybe also speaking towards the composition of the fellows that we're going to pick, the maintainers out of the applications that we get. Within the survey I mentioned earlier, we also had this data point that roughly 1/3 of the respondents said they're going to only need less than 20 working hours a week. And that made us think, right? Because that means, okay, I have this 3 libraries that I'm maintaining or 4 or something, and maybe I'm contributing to some upstream things as well, because that's my ecosystem and I need to help them to work on this dependency that I'm also dependent on, right? We thought, maybe that's also a thing, right? That you have people who say, maybe I can work on this Friday. So I take Friday off from my work. So I go to 4-day work week with my current employment or with my current customers if I am a freelance contractor. And I use this Friday to work on my libraries full time, maintaining the things. And I have this focus and I don't need to get myself distracted all the time. And that's also benefiting my mental health maybe, right? Because I can have this focus. And at some point, maybe after the 12 months or maybe in the future, I can extend this to also take the Thursday into that one, right? And that could be an avenue into a paid open source job, so to say, right? And that's interesting for us also within this composition of the applications that we get, that we want to make room for what we call small freelance, which means, maybe there's people only working 8 hours a week on maintaining their projects. And I think that's also kind of responding to the question you had, Abby, around what's actually the composition, big projects, small projects. And so we had this idea to also make room for folks maintaining all smaller things, but it has to be within our criteria. And our criteria is clearly in the public interest, which says it has to be relevant in a way. It has to be prevalent, what we call, and it has to be critical. It has to be vulnerable. So it has to be in the public interest. So your public project that you're working on in the Stellar, that's nice. But if nobody is using this or it has no influence or no impact on the public interest, that wouldn't fit our criteria. But still, there are small libraries where you need to have your dependable right and get those 5 PRs a month, but they need some time for proper reviewing and so on. So you will have the time for this maybe on that Friday, and you can take your day off from your employer and reduce your working time there and get into a paid, sustainable way of working with an open source.
I'm really glad you mentioned that. My main question I've had in my head is, why are you paying individuals, 4 or 5 people, as opposed to seeding community stuff? Why not pay 30 people for 5 hours a week, right? Would that be more sustainable? That's kind of like the UBI argument, right? Instead of paying full time, just give everyone $500 and see what happens. And I'm just curious if there was thought put into why this sort of frame for the pilot.
It is driven a little bit from the data we had from the survey, where we saw this kind of composition. People want to work full time because they have existing clients and they can get rid of it in a way to replace it with full-time open source work for a year. So that would be really beneficial for them, and that would fit their specific situation in their lives right now. So there's people within the survey who exactly said that, right? But there was also other people in there. So that's kind of the compositioning model that we choose now. But it's also learning. So within the pilot, we want to really learn from different models. So there's going to be an evaluation of the whole program that we would find some external evaluator to help us with finding the right questions towards the evaluation and getting the right answers, of course, with the people that we are working with. So it's something that where we felt, when we diversify this kind of composition, then we can get the maximum out of it for us as a learning experience.
Have you thought about the composition of who you're looking to fund? Is it solely white male developers from Germany, or are you hoping to do more than that?
Of course. So it's only white male people in Germany because no, of course not. So that's also one of the things we had in mind. So I think the whole initiative is really also focused on centered around this whole diversity aspect. So we believe that people who like to get paid for things, that's really making a difference for folks who are not that privileged, like me, for instance, right? So my kids are a little bit older. I come from a very privileged position. I had some well-paid jobs in my past, so I'm not really dependent on anything anymore. And the other part of the planet where it's the complete opposite, right? And getting people into this position could really make a difference here. And for the freelance options, we are able to contract people globally, so nearly globally, with some constraints with the regulations from the European Union procurement kind of stuff, but that's doable, I guess. And for the internal employment option, we had to limit it to Germany for now, only because some, internal employment is always a little bit harder and more regulated and so on. So that's the constraint there. But for the freelance options, we are able to contract people globally. And that's also the case for our general fund. So that's really also something to keep in mind, that this Sovereign Tech Fund is not only a German initiative that's only for the German people. I mean, it's also for the German people, of course. It's our economy and it's our public interest that's also based on the digital infrastructure. But as you know, open source has no borders. And that's very nice to see this, that actually also a German Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action, that they really acknowledged this fact, so that people understood this very fact. And that's what gave me a lot of confidence for a brighter future as well.
What's your success for this? Like, at what point does it grow? What metrics are you using to measure?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we are always evaluating things also in terms of impact, right? So the best thing for us is always then when we leave a project that things are in a better state compared to the state when we started the investment. And I mean, that's difficult to measure all the time. As we know in software engineering, it's very difficult to find metrics for this very fact. But I think when it comes to engineering metrics, you can have a look at kind of modularization, test coverage, documentation, community growth. There's lots of things you can have a look at. And I think that's also the things that we want to look at, also together with Lorenzo, who has lots of experience in mentoring and coaching those communities, and help them to have the best possible impact on their communities. But I guess it's also this one silver bullet, I would say. So we have very different projects. We have very different maturity levels. And I think there has to be different solutions and different measurements on how to grow projects. So there could be different avenues there.
Yeah, and just to plus one what Mirko just said, we are actively having a separate working group within STF, looking into in general, for all our investments, how can we better define success? How can we have some metrics that can help us evaluate? As Mirko mentioned earlier, also, we're going to have some external experts potentially reviewing and helping us find metrics around this specific fellowship, these first 5 fellows, questions to ask them maybe at the start, at the middle, and at the end. But also we're looking, for example, at the Chaos Practitioner Guide and all the other metrics out there. I know you recently did an episode about that. So it's very much like a general program in open source and specifically for the fellowship. But our hope in general is that if this year we're doing it 5 people with Lorenzo from STF doing it in-house on the side, helping the maintainers, maybe next year is going to be 10 and we're going to have some actual contracted expert. Who knows? But we would love to give all the money that we can to open source and even more every year, make all the projects more sustainable, more able to sustain themselves after we leave them. So if the numbers go up, we're always happy.
One part of this success, if you allow me this sentence, is also around making the proof that the Sovereign Tech Fund and the things we are doing is a good role model so that we show to the world this is actually working. This is a functioning model so that people from other organizations, all the different entities, not to forget industry as well. So it shouldn't be always taxpayers' money, right? So we are also inviting industry constantly to get also into this kind of funding as well, showing that this kind of success can lead also to other people doing the same thing, maybe in different ways, but to copy parts of our learnings. I mean, we are an open source shop, you could say, so we're very transparent. We try to communicate everything, and that's maybe also helpful for others to do similar things.
Can you tell me what's the overall budget for the pilot?
So we reserve 300K, which is not a lot. It's a pilot. It's still something. And then for the year after next, we are really planning to grow this, but we're also very dependent on the people that give us our money. So, and as you all know, like budgets are tight all the time and it's constant struggle, I'd say, right? So we always have to prove that it's really working and it's a very volatile environment, but still, it's a starting point. You know?
The reason I asked is it's clear that the STF is putting in so much effort to make this work, so much effort to help out open source, so much effort to think about what models could be applied, and also how do you do this at a governmental scale. And I love that. And Germany's great for doing that. But Germany's only one country out of, 180 sovereign states or something. And I'm always curious, since you're doing all this work already, have you reached out to any countries about just donating to the pot to help you so that they could have their own sovereign tech fund where you help run it for them so we could have a bigger pilot, right? So where's Austria's 5 developers type thing? And I'm just curious if you've thought about that, if reached out to other countries to help out.
Yeah, I think our co-founders, they're really touring the world to speak about the program and to speak about the success story, so to say. And there's lots of interest from what I hear from different areas of the world. Yeah, we also have the European Union, which is also very interested in what we're doing. They're putting up the Cyber Resilience Act currently that has elements in there which would benefit from a better financing for maintainers and for open source projects as well. The United States are doing something similar. So there is some momentum currently going on, I guess, and budgets are moving slow and political decisions as well. So I think we need to be a little bit more patient here, but I guess there is movement and our team is very good, I think, in talking also about those things.
I'm glad to hear that movement is happening. I'm really glad to hear about this program in general. I sometimes ask difficult questions that may sound cynical, but in reality, I can't express how cool I think it is to have a government decide to pay individual maintainers for things that are not a project without having them write a massive grant or learn how to write a grant. Like that in itself is a major stepping stone and milestone. So kudos to you both. Kudos to the entire team. I'm really excited to see how this goes. And please keep us updated. Post as much as you can. Pohen, I want to see your name every day in the news. Let's go. So speaking of which, I'm a maintainer. I maintain stuff. I have a German sounding last name. Where do I apply and when?
So, because again, it's a pilot, it's very small. On September 12th, that's the day where we've rolled out all the blog posts, the announcement, the application form. So from that day onward, and if everything goes well, you're hearing this right in time, you have until the 20th of October. So that's a Sunday. So don't wait until Sunday. Use your Saturday to fill it up in time. And you have a time until then to apply to the platform. As Mirko mentioned, if you're not German-based, you will have to apply to the freelancer option. There are going to be 2 separate paths. There are going to be FAQs that describe all the details and all the questions you may have. And then we wish you good luck. You just need to go on the Sovereign Tech Fund website, the program. You're going to see all the buttons that will funnel you to the thing that you're looking for.
If you're able to apply before the 25th of September, I will pay you $1. Send me an email and I will somehow send you $1 on GitHub Sponsors or Open Collective. Just because I've never tried that before in this podcast, and I don't know who listens to this, and that would be really fun. But
be careful, Richard.
If too many people ask for $1, that's a great outcome. I'm sure people will help me donate to the pot of people who apply early and use their Saturdays wisely. That's really cool. We'll have those links in the show notes for everyone. Do check that out. Lorenzo, Mirko, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this project. We didn't get to talk about anything else at STF, and that's okay because this is the most important thing and coolest thing going on. You two are in the hot seat. That is exciting. Don't leave yet, however. At the end of every podcast, we have a little bit which is about other people because we are all about thanks here for unnoticed work. So that's right. This is Spotlight. It's the part of the show where we highlight projects, persons, or things which just need a bit of light put on them. Abby Mays, what is your spotlight today?
I was thinking about this while we were talking. And I think most of you know, I just recently came back from mat leave. And seems like a weird thing to spotlight, but it's Yoga Mamas Toronto, specifically the community. It's also like a company that runs yoga classes for moms and babies. But the community from there, it's been great. I got to meet the other moms that have kids the same age as mine. It's just nice knowing other moms that like live in my neighborhood. And it was also just nice doing yoga with my baby. So shout out to Yoga Mamas Toronto, but like the community part specifically, I think that's what I'm shouting out.
Love that. Thank you so much. My spotlight today is going to be Jamie McQuilken, who, while Googling furiously, I have found out is also the name of a footballer. I don't give a crap about football, so not that guy. Jamie McQuilken is one of my best friends, has been since college when we were roommates, and he's done a lot of awesome work on methane, flying drones over garbage dumps to track methane emissions, which is a lot worse than carbon. It's a really bad greenhouse gas, but also done really good work talking to me over the years about what generational sustainability would look like, planting the trees now so our children can grow and make ships in 100 years. So I don't really have a single shout out. I just want to say thank you, Jamie, for continuing to inform my discussions. Our mentors can also be a few days younger than us. That's fine. Lorenzo, what's your spotlight today?
I didn't want to be the one after this because now I'm going to feel so bad. So you're talking about, the future and the environment. And I'm here spotlighting Proton from Valve. But hear me out. So here's the thing. I didn't want to shout out any open source project that could apply to our fund. What's something that is open source that I can shout out, but it's never going to apply? And I was like, perfect. I have a Steam Deck. It's lovely. It's perfect. It allows me to play so many games. And most of these games I can play because they have released Proton. Like they've made Proton is based on Wine, but basically allows you to run Windows games on Linux, which is like peak. And the fact that it's open source, it makes it so much better. And yeah, the Steam Deck is great. So yeah, that's my safe pick so that everyone that applies will not feel like I'm favoring someone else.
That's fine. That's totally okay. Thank you for doing that. Mirko, what about you?
Yeah, I have to admit, it took me way too long this afternoon to decide on this question because I had so many open source projects in mind. And then the question was like, what is impacting my life? And I was thinking, yeah, that's going to really big now. And then I just decided for Signal and the Signal app because for me, it's really a game changer when this came out. And I now have the possibility to chat with non-technical persons on a secure way, which was not possible before. And with technology that at least I can trust. I know there's people having some issues also with that one, but still for me, it's a good compromise. And that's why I want to put Signal on the spotlight.
Thank you so much. Signal is awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Listeners, thank you for joining us as well. You are the unspoken heroes of this podcast. Without you, nothing happens. Speaking of which, without you, nothing will continue to happen unless you also do your part. That's right. This is the part where I beg you to do things. Go talk to your friends. Tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your friends about the STF. Like, tell them to apply. You should apply. Everyone should apply. Richard@sustainoss.org or podcast@sustainoss.org is where you send your request for the $1 after you've applied, or just any comments or hate mail. Just send them over there. That'd be really, really great. If you have listened to this podcast on a platform that has a like feature or a share feature or a subscribe feature, the link is down below, I guess, on YouTube is what they say. But just like it and share it. That'd be really, really dope. Share it on Mastodon, Federated Things, Blue Sky, all the cool stuff. Don't share it on X. Get off of X. It's horrible. I will stand by that forever. Besides that, you can also donate to this. Go to opencollective.com/sustainoss. Our editor is not free, and this work is not free in general. We are your open source project. We are actually open source. Some of the code that we use to make this podcast is open source. So please donate to us and convince your line manager / people above you to do the same. That'd be really, really cool. Besides that, go to the show notes at https://podcast@sustainoss.org to get the awesome links from this episode and others. You can also go back to Lorenzo's first episode, number 17. That was a long time ago. Thank you so much for coming on again, Lorenzo. Thank you, Mirko. Thank you, Abby, for joining us today. And best of luck. Tell us how it goes.
Thank you for having us. We will sure share as much as we can.
Thanks also from my side. It was a pleasure.